My name is Stacey. I'm the CEO of WildWorks, based in Salt Lake City. Our principal game is called Animal Jam, and as mentioned, we have about 85 million registered users across 6 languages. We put a lot of effort into moderation. If you were here for the panel preceding this, talking about COPPA issues, regulatory issues, and safety, you'll know that this is a big priority for us and for our tech team. And that's a little bit of what I'll get into today with or without visual aids. So if it's without visual aids, then I will act it out in interpretive dance. Really what I'm going to be talking about is a problem fundamental to working in the kid space and trying to make games for kids that make money. And that is that there are some built-in challenges to user acquisition among kids that are unique and I think that are very daunting to a lot of developers. I think across the board, ARPU is lower in the kid space. OpEx is higher. OpEx is higher for all the reasons that the panel was talking about, that you need to be making investments in safety and privacy that your average game company does not. But also the ability to target potential players is very different for kids. If I'm making a deer hunting game or a cooking game, right, I can go on Facebook and I can zero in on likely hunters, likely chefs, and I can target them very precisely. Now there are some great platforms like Super Awesome that is certainly the future in terms of being able to do kids UA with privacy and ethically. But you're still not going to have the targeting and the precision that you do in a Facebook or with other platforms. If your games are for kids up to the age of about 8, there are a lot of parent blog networks you can work with. Oh, there we go. Cool. So I was about to run out of things to say. This is a picture of us at Halloween. We love Halloween. Okay, mentioned all that. Yeah, so if you're making games for kids up to about 8, there are a lot of parent blog networks that you can work with. We've had mixed success with this, I think, because our sweet spot demographically is a little bit older. But you can work with them, and for younger kids, I think that they can be pretty effective. For us, by the time kids get to be 8, they're not really consulting their parents on the apps that they download. Another problem is that you can spend the money to do a surge campaign and chart in the app stores, but that doesn't really matter either because that's also not where kids are getting their app recommendations. They're getting them from friends and from YouTube and games they discover that way. But there's all this exciting stuff happening in UA and engagement with players. There's Twitch. There's YouTubers. There's influencers. Discord. Fan art, all this great stuff, and it feels like kids game developers are kind of shut out from most of that because of safety and privacy issues. And the fact is that's true. There is risk there. However, over the past few years, we've been nurturing a group of social media influencers that we saw emerging organically around our game. And that's what I'm going to talk about today, is a little bit how we recognize that, what we did, what some of the pitfalls are, so that hopefully you can reproduce those results in your own games. If you're not familiar with Animal Jam, here's some quick facts on that. It does have a lot of educational DNA running through it, but it is what we like to call entertainment with a substance. That is, it's entertainment first, but it has a semi-secret undercurrent of encouraging girls to enter careers in the sciences. Our audience is about 70% female in terms of engagement, about 80% female in terms of monetization. If you look at our demographic chart here, this is, I think kind of interesting. If you look over at the right, you'll see our sweet spot, obviously, call it 8 to 12, but then there's this big spike at 16 plus. And the reason for that is that those are kids, Animal Jam launched in 2010, those are kids that have been playing since 2010 and are still playing now. They're going into college, but they're still playing Animal Jam, they're still making YouTube videos about it, they're still active enough that they make a spike in our demographic chart. But I think that's indicative that fundamentally this game has succeeded, the web and mobile, because of the community that's built up around it. Of these kids that are still playing in high school and college, one of those was our first fan blogger. Back in 2011, I think the game had been live for a few months, and we discovered this fan blog. And it was created by somebody whose name in the game was Snowy Claw, and that's all that we knew about this player. It was updated all the time. It seemed super ambitious. There was a debate at Wildworks as to whether this was even a kid who was making this. But it was fantastic, and it was especially updated every time there was a new content release in the game. So that became our pattern, was that as soon as we released content, we would, be gritting our teeth all night to wait to see what Snowy Claw said about it the next day. Eventually, I met Snowy Claw. She's in her 3rd year of college now, and she interns with us when she's not flying around the world doing wildlife conservation projects. And I told her at the time, you didn't realize it, but you were running our company for several years. If you had told us that the next update should be on Mars, it probably would have been on Mars. She had huge influence there because while we did have a lot of mechanisms in the game for getting player feedback, this was somehow more, I guess, more refined, more raw. This was somebody who was obviously very passionate about the game. They weren't just a kid in a focus group playing the game and saying, well, I like this, I don't like that. This is somebody who loved the game, who loved the story, the IP, the whole thing, and any critique coming from her seemed a lot more germane to what we ought to do next than just the average person spouting off, right? So this was our first, influencer of sorts. And the next year, we saw this explosion in Animal Jam music videos that appear on YouTube. These became really popular. The last time I checked, there were about 7 million of them that you can search up on YouTube, or at least hits on that term. But kids would recruit other players in the game to be like their backup dancers, and they would stage these elaborate music videos to popular songs in the game, record them, and put them up on YouTube. Including one of my favorites here, a player called Wisteria Moon, who recreated the whole Michael Jackson Thriller video inside Animal Jam, complete with zombie animal backup dancers. Yeah, it goes on and on. I commend it to your attention if you don't believe me. There were so a lot of user passion around the game, and some innovative stuff that we never would have thought to include or solicit or anything like that. But we didn't know how to approach these kids. We had a lot of trepidation around talking to a Snowy Claw or a Wisteria Moon because of all the risks involved. And it would be 3 more years after the appearance of these music videos before we actually started working directly with any of these kids. And the risks, I think, are pretty obvious. First of all, these kids are under 13, right? And their videos are on YouTube and Instagram, where they're not supposed to be anyway. We weren't even sure that we could legally contact them. That's not part of our privacy policy. And it was, we were very concerned about what the wishes of the parents would be. Maybe the parents don't even know that they're doing this. We were also concerned about something that we'd had a little bit of history with. What if we associate one of these kids with our brand and they go do something bad? They go PewDiePie on us. That's not something that we want associated with a brand, and they're unpredictable by their nature. We saw something like this. We had one Animal Jam YouTuber in our first year of operation who discovered this bug where you could place a tiki torch den item on top of a certain table den item and thereby turn your den into a pole dancing club and invite everyone else in the game to visit it. we shut that down pretty quickly. But what if we started working with some of these YouTubers and later we find that their behavior in the game is not exactly something that we want to be encouraging? There is, our audience is tweens by and large, and their moment-to-moment consciousness is a hormonal Category 5 hurricane. They form cliques, they have epic feuds and rivalries, which our community team would watch unfold over Instagram or YouTube or elsewhere, and very carefully stay away from. But in the game, we had the moderation tools to prevent bullying and meanness. These kids were out making videos about our game in places where they don't have those tools. So, what if some kids that we seem to endorse in the game seem to be perpetuating that behavior? And of course, we're worried that given their age, these kids were just going to age out of the Animal Jam community or naturally move on to other games. So these are legitimate risks, but there are also some great reasons for us to start working directly with these kind of in-game celebrity players. One of them was so that they could be trusted liaisons and ombudsmen for us to the player community. This came up in the panel that was up here before. We have a big problem with security across kids' games in general because kids pick really bad passwords, just by their nature. And if they do pick a good password, it's pretty easy to persuade them to share it with somebody else, somebody who may have nefarious designs on their Animal Jam items. And there are a lot of there are tech things that we can do to mitigate this, but a lot of it just has to be education. A lot of it has to be reaching the kids, letting them know that there are people out there that would try and scam them out of their Animal Jam items, that if somebody asks just to borrow their password so that they can try on an outfit that they have in their den, don't do it. That kind of password security education. That when this would happen, when somebody would take somebody's password, go in, clean out all of their items, they've just stolen all of their toys. Super upsetting for kids, super upsetting for parents, makes the game look like it's easily hackable. It's bad news. So we would do blog posts, we made videos with some of the celebrity scientists that we work with. We did in-game messaging, but a lot of kids just tune that stuff out. We could use the official AJ YouTube channel to broadcast this message, but kids weren't exactly burning up their mouse buttons to watch our safety videos. And we had to get the message out through influential AJ players to just with a few simple safety guidelines, say just do this and you won't have to worry about being hacked. When we did this, when we asked our YouTubers to kind of help us get this message out, the effect was immediate and dramatic. A typical video that we did, our official safety promo video up there at the top, has accumulated 18,000 views over 6 years, but a player-made video has been watched 131,000 times in 1 year. You imagine that reach multiplied by all of our influencers and the kids that they reach, and it's millions of players. Consequently, there's a real tangible benefit just on account security, and that's measurable. We get fewer complaints from parents and kids about this. Our community team is not having to answer disciplinary problems about this as much. That falls right to our bottom line. And players also learn some very important safety tools that they'll need to carry into adulthood when the consequences of bad password security are a lot more serious. So we created our Bassinger Program. This is a group of older players that our community team became familiar with over time. They were chosen because they had large audiences, because they showed a real love for the game and the community. They kept their videos kid-safe in terms of language and themes, and whose parents were supportive of the idea of them both doing this and working directly with us. Our Jambassadors range in age now from 14 to 21, although all of them started playing much younger. Some have been playing as long as 7 years, others as little as 2. And while we don't pay our Jambassadors, they are still pretty well compensated. The most popular among them have hundreds of thousands of subscribers to their YouTube channels, tens of millions of views. and they make up to $20,000 a month just off of YouTube revenue alone. That definitely beats babysitting money for a 15-year-old. Some have even set up their own online merchandise stores, selling items that they aren't branded Animal Jam, but they may include images of their avatars from the game that they've come to be associated with. So boiling this down, I'll talk about some of the benefits that we've seen from this, but here are some tips that we've learned over our course of working with these kids. First of all, recognizing them in the game as being special because of all of the work they're doing outside the game is totally legit. You can acknowledge them in your social media channels and in the game itself. We have this Bassinger plaque that is, an ultra rare item in the game. Only these kids have it, and they can display it in their den. You can create a back channel for them. We have a Slack channel dedicated to the Jambassadors with members of our community team in there, so they have a direct feedback and problem reporting channel right into the development team. We do exclusive assets for them. When we have new games or new things to demo, they're kind of on the front lines of that. These kids have their own kind of content mill to keep filled, right? They need to keep posting videos, and they've told us that exclusive stuff, behind the scenes stuff, is the most popular stuff that they can do and the easiest for them to produce. Don't use them, though, as a substitute for your official social media voice. Their success is tied to their authenticity. And they lose that if it comes to seem like they're just a mouthpiece for the developers, right? So you need to have your own social media voice, the official channel, and then these guys need to have their own voice, and you have to let them have that. And be prepared to step in and help them when YouTube's system works them over. I think it's getting worse now, obviously, for smaller video producers that are being demonetized. But even for some of our more popular ones, they'll put something up, it'll flag something for some reason where they need the copyright holder to step in and say, no, that's okay. So we try and do that very quickly because that can be very frustrating to them since their monetization is very time sensitive. Things that you should not do. Don't try and astroturf this. Don't try and fake it with, by going out and trying to create the appearance of having these super fans when you don't necessarily have them. You're not going to fool kids into thinking that a social media personality that you gin up is authentic. So you just don't embarrass yourself. Start with real fans that are making up their own stuff out of the game because they really love it. Don't undermine their authenticity by putting words in their mouth or by over-policing your branding. They're going to make stuff out of your characters. They're going to make stuff out of your game, and that deviates from your style guide, and that's okay. You're not going to lose your copyright if you let them play around with it a little bit. Obviously, you can't link to adult social networks like YouTube directly from your game if it's COPPA compliant, but you can from your separate social channels. You also would undermine their authenticity if you bend the rules for them. We have a code of conduct in Animal Jam. Even Jambassadors that step outside of that may be suspended or disciplined or something. If they're seen as the teacher's pet, then they're going to lose the voice that they have that makes them effective for you to begin with. So the risks that I brought up before, how we mitigate those. Our first contact in reaching out to these kids was not to them directly, it was to their parents. It's pretty important, not only in accordance with most privacy policies, but just best practice. We were very slow to engage with them, which gave us a lot of time to watch their channels emerge over time. You mitigate the scandal problem by watching them over a long period of time, and you can see if they're susceptible to this kind of thing or not. There were some popular AJ personalities that we passed over because they didn't demonstrate a commitment to kid-friendly content. They wanted to do edgier content, which is cool, that's fine, they can do that, but we don't want to bring them into the kind of blessed Jambassadors program. As far as drama goes, clearly you don't want to engage, you don't want to take sides, you want to show them how to rise above, just provide some leadership there. And in terms of them aging out of your game or becoming bored with it, it is going to happen. And you support them as an extension of supporting your players. They're not your office spokespeople, so they will churn out, and hopefully with a lot of affection for the game that they've spent a lot of time in. You know, we talked to ours from the outset of them as older players being kind of elder statesmen to younger players, and that's a position they respect. So even those that have come to us and said, hey, I'm in college right now, I can't really do this anymore, it feels weird to be playing a kid's game all the time, they'll still come back periodically, you know, just in affection for the game, and they're still well known in the game, so it's kind of fun for the players to see them again as well. So quickly, results from this. If you're making games in this demographic, I can't recommend VidCon highly enough. 26,000 people attended VidCon last year, mostly female, substantially in the Animal Jam demographic. If you make games for girls, this should be the most important event of the year for you. But we, both in 16 and 17, flew our 8 most popular Jambassador influencers out to VidCon and did some live events with them, and it's been a really cool experience. We had live streams, got huge fan engagement there, had autograph signing parties and things for them. It was really cool, I think, for them to see firsthand how, you know, their audience and kind of feel the love from that audience. These guys were mobbed throughout their time at VidCon. I think it kind of blew their minds a little bit. And in terms of, yeah, feeling that love and energy in the community is sort of what we're in it for, and I think now what they're in it for. It energized all of them to come back and work on their channels more. Quick stats. Yeah, we have good stats that we can point to that demonstrate the ROI on this is positive. On the Bassinger program in general, they drive CCUs. They drive in-game item sales, 1 million over baseline just during the VidCon event. And the follow-on effect, I think, is incalculable. You know, we hear increasingly from players who became fans of one of these kids that was their first introduction to Animal Jam. You know, it is a direct UA channel in that sense because they're discovering them on YouTube. But beyond those stats, there's the fact that we now have a unique way to talk to players when it really matters, when we really need them to hear us. We get unvarnished feedback from them and through them. Our licensing partners love them. Unboxing videos of Animal Jam stuff have become a new popular genre for them as our toy line launched in 16. Now they're doing the same thing with apparel with similar results. And it's become a new way for them to engage with their audience. There are pitfalls to be avoided, as we talked about, but dedicating some of your team's time to engaging directly with super fans in this way, it's a tremendous force multiplier to user acquisition, and I think to getting feedback from your audience. I know I'm running short on time, so that is all for, I don't know if we have time for any questions. Yes.
Really nice talk. So you mentioned early that your first saw that people were making music videos out of the gameplay. My question is if you thought about that could be a shareable content, and later on if the design of the game changed to sort of create more experiences that people could share in the game.
Yeah, good question. There are some concerns on the privacy side over the ability for kids to share media out of the game. Sharing it inside the game, not a problem. And we have like photo booths in the game where they can capture an image of their avatar and save it to their local drive, but we don't let them post it directly from the game to Instagram or that. That would run afoul of COPPA, that would require a different level of parental consent, and I just don't think it's best practice in safety. That said, yeah, there are things that we can do as far as adjusting features so that it makes it easier to do stuff like capture video for music videos and that. And that is stuff that we talk about and pay attention to in some of the things that we have in development that is for an older transitional audience that's deeply ingrained in it. But it is a good point. You do walk a fine line there with safety best practice. So.
Okay, yeah, great,
right.
Clark. Thanks
very
everybody.
much.